Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This is the first time that signs have been snatched off our lawn. It made me feel like I was living in Soviet Russia.
Disappearing election signs, the budding controversy in Surrey, and the claims being made. Plus, explosive new allegations about the owner of the Vancouver Canucks.
It's coming up through the glacier, right? It's a very Canadian volcano that is coming up through ice.
And a rare glimpse into the mysteries beneath a sleeping giant north of Whistler. Why a dormant volcano could hold the future of geothermal energy.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with disappearing election signs. Voters in Surrey are raising concerns with bylaw officers removing advertising from their front lawns. As John Hernandez reports, with BC's municipal election inching closer, no one wants to take the blame.
I've had signs here for going on 15 years and never had any problem before.
For 3 weeks, Rob Winston had election signs up outside of his Surrey home until just days ago when they disappeared.
Then I came home and I didn't really look very hard, and my neighbor pointed out that the signs were gone.
And it's a similar story for his neighbors.
Someone came and removed it from my property without introducing themselves to me.
I was flabbergasted. I've lived in Surrey for over 40 years. I've always exercised my democratic right to put up an election sign.
We're looking here at the Surrey sign bylaw.
Mayoral candidate and current councillor Brenda Locke says it comes down to a 2019 amendment banning signs on public land. But she says enforcement is going too far, with signs that are just inches past property lines being targeted.
A little bit of common sense goes a long way. If a sign is almost on somebody's property, for our bylaws department to take them away is just, it's really an abuse of power.
The incident marks the latest in a political sign saga that saw the city's current mayor and council vote to prohibit the display of signs outside of election season.
This is just more of the good work of this mayor that he has done in the past.
CBC News reached out to the incumbent's party, who deferred comment to city bylaw staff, which responded by saying officers are simply enforcing the rules. Meanwhile, other candidates say their signs have been targeted by rivals.
It's disappointing to come back and see that your signs have been removed, stolen, or vandalized and being replaced by other slates. People don't have freedom to express who they want to support.
These lawns, the front lines of a municipal battle that will be decided when polls open on October 15th. John Hernandez, CBC News, Surrey.
There are some explosive new allegations tonight about the owner of the Vancouver Canucks. Francesco Aquilini and his ex-wife Talia are locked in dispute over support payments, and our Tara Carmen was in court today to hear the new accusations. Tara, what's being alleged?
So, Anita, the background is the couple divorced in 2013. And under the terms of their agreement, Francesco Aquilini is paying university expenses for 3 of the couple's 4 adult children, and some of the expenses when they're at home with their mother. But he stopped doing that in August because he says the receipts are missing key details. Talia Aquilini says her children asked her to remove any information from these receipts that identifies their locations or which universities they attend, because she says they're afraid of him, don't want him to know where they live, and haven't had contact with him for years. Now, we don't have access to their affidavits, but Talia Aquilini's lawyer did read a portion of a March 2020 letter sent by the oldest sibling on behalf of all of them to their father. It reads, "Your relationship with us is a direct consequence of your treatment toward us, whether you like to acknowledge it or not. We all hold many individual accounts of your abuse towards us. I would like to formally state that myself and my siblings wish to have no contact with you, nor would we like you to have access to any of our contact, medical information, or other information regarding our lives." In other affidavits from Aquilini's children read out in court, they allege they were beaten for being too loud and that they locked themselves in the bathroom to protect themselves. Now, it wasn't clear when these events took place or which child was making the allegations. And it is important to note here, Anita, that there is no criminal investigation and none of these allegations have been proven in court.
Okay, and Tara, was Francesco Aquilini in court today?
No, but his ex-wife's lawyer says he's previously denied the abuse allegations, and his lawyer says they're irrelevant to the issue of support payments. Aquilini's lawyer also says he's not seeking any personal information about his children, but needs more information about the expenses he's paying for and whether they're legitimate. He wants his ex-wife to provide unredacted receipts to his lawyer on condition that the lawyer not share any private information about his children with his client. The judge will give her decision on whether Aquilini must continue to pay at a later date.
All right, Tara Carmen, thank you for joining us tonight. And Francesco Aquilini is responding to the allegations in the children's affidavits tonight. He's telling the Vancouver Sun that he categorically denies the accusations and is outraged by the suggestions that he has ever abused his kids. Okay, moving on now. Closing arguments started today in a landmark Indigenous land title case at BC Supreme Court. The New Chumlet First Nation is aiming to prove its claim to hundreds of kilometers of Crown land on Vancouver Island. As Eva Ugwensenj tells us, a judge is set to determine if they occupied the disputed land in 1846.
A small nation with a loud voice. The New Chumlet Nation counts less than 200 members, but it won't give up a legal battle against the governments of BC and Canada.
There's only 160 of us left. I'm pretty sure they were hoping that they could have wiped us out and just took our land, but here we are. We're not going anywhere.
Dozens of protesters gathered in a show of support outside BC Supreme Court in Vancouver. For 5 years, the New Chumlet Nation has been fighting to obtain Aboriginal title over a patch of land off the west coast of Vancouver Island, with support from other nations.
For thousands upon thousands of years, the New Chumlet have been there. They know exactly where their title starts and finishes.
The land at stake is located about 300 kilometers northwest of Victoria. It spans over 230 square kilometers and includes a large part of Nootka Island. The lawsuit names the province of BC, Canada's Attorney General, and the logging company Western Forest Products. It asks for a declaration that recognizes their title and puts a stop to logging in the area.
We were making some demands with Western Forest Products that we wanted to slow down, we wanted to manage, we wanted to be part of the process. They said no.
Lawyers for the province have argued that before the British claimed the area in the 19th century, the New Chumlet were a relatively small and relatively weak association of groups. The nation's leaders say that is not true.
And our ancestors used every square inch of our territories. And then the province has the nerve to say we abandoned our land.
The First Nations lawyer says that ultimately the goal of the lawsuit is reconciliation. Both sides are to deliver closing arguments this week, while hearings are set to continue until mid-October. Eva Ugwensenj, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC drivers are bracing for even higher gas prices.
It is crazy. I'm thinking to use the SkyTrain nowadays. Yeah.
I prefer walking or biking or something else right now.
It's so expensive to travel.
Gas prices, it's too expensive to do it.
And we come into town to look after our grandkids. So it's a little bit of an inconvenience that way.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's killing us.
Prices in Metro Vancouver have been hitting record highs, with some locations reporting more than $2.30 a litre. A woman is dead after being hit by a charter bus in downtown Vancouver. It happened around 12:30 near Stanley Park at West Georgia and Cardero. Police say there were several witnesses on the street, and they plan to speak with them, as well as the driver of the bus.
Although it's early in the investigation, we believe at this point the bus was making a turn onto Georgia Street and for whatever reason didn't see the pedestrian, and there was a collision that occurred.
This is the city's 8th pedestrian death this year. The owner of Charter Bus Lines, Trax Holdings, says its thoughts are with the victim's family. And in Delta, a pedestrian is dead after a crash this morning. The Delta Police Department responded at 6:30 at the intersection of 112th Street and 80th Avenue. Officers found a 60-year-old man suffering from serious injuries. The driver involved in the crash had left the scene before police arrived, but has since come forward and is cooperating with investigators. The victim was transported to the hospital, but died of his injuries. Well, a BC man now in his late 70s has been found guilty of numerous counts of sexual assault. Raymond Gillardy of Coquitlam appeared in BC Supreme Court in New Westminster yesterday, and court records show he was convicted on 11 counts. The charges relate to historical sexual assaults of young men or teenage boys who attended several Coquitlam area churches between 1993 and 2007. An investigation began in 2019, and the first charges were laid the following year when Gillardy was 75 years old. He is scheduled to return to court for a pre-sentence report in December. There's a warning out tonight advising anyone selling or trading items on Facebook Marketplace or other platforms to be careful meeting with buyers. There have been 3 violent robberies this week.
It's very concerning that these are violent robberies that have happened. They occurred in public places, they occurred in populated places, and the people who were the victims did what they were supposed to do.
All 3 sellers chose to meet in public places, but were still robbed of the items they were trying to sell. One victim was attacked with bear spray, and last night, a man trying to sell a watch was robbed at gunpoint. Vancouver police urge anyone buying or selling used items to meet at a designated location outside VPD headquarters to lower the chances of violent crime. Well, the BC Liberals are hoping a name change and rebranding push will curb voter confusion with the federal Liberal Party. The centre-right party is proposing its name be changed to the BC United after consultations with its membership. BC Liberal leader Kevin Falcon made the change one of his leadership campaign promises earlier this year.
The name at the core is not the issue. It's Kevin Falcon and his record that's the issue. Kevin Falcon's got the record of raising all the fares, the rates that we pay as British Columbians, and giving the most wealthy people in this province tax breaks.
Members will get to vote on the new name by the end of this year. We're getting a rare glimpse tonight into the mysteries deep beneath the surface of a sleeping giant north of Whistler. Laura Lynch, who is the host of CBC Radio's What on Earth, takes us up to Mount Meager, where a dormant volcano could hold the future of geothermal energy in Canada.
It's a geologist's pilgrimage of sorts to a place scientists explored then abandoned decades ago, nestled among the giant peaks of BC's coastal mountains.
But it's coming up through the glacier, right? It's a very Canadian volcano that is coming up through ice.
But that's steam, not smoke.
Yeah, it's steam coming from the ground, right, from the volcano underneath.
The secret lying deep in the fiery belly of these icy peaks. There's energy there, infinite, renewable energy. Because this is actually a volcano. The glacier, melting due to a warming planet, is revealing huge holes spewing steam and noxious gases. That's another indication that there's power, geothermal power, to be harnessed.
We're right in the crater of the last explosive volcanic eruption in Canada 2,400 years ago.
What does the fumarole tell you about the capacity of this mountain to provide geothermal energy?
I mean, what this fumarole is it's just steam coming out of the earth, right? And so this is exactly the kind of stuff you want to look for when you're looking for geothermal resources.
We're now in Squamish, a short drive from Vancouver. The small airport here serves as a gateway to BC's volcanic belt. Today is all about seeing the past, present, and future of geothermal energy in Canada. Our guide is Steve Grasby, the government geologist who's leading the push to rediscover and develop the remarkable sustainable resource. And the first stop on our tour is an encounter with the past. We're heading to Mount Meager. The region's geothermal potential was first discovered at this site more than 40 years ago, pushed forward by a need for a new energy source.
Prime Minister Clark said for the first time today there may be oil shortages in some parts of Canada this winter.
In the 1970s, the cost of gas skyrocketed due to conflict and revolution in the Middle East. People worried about filling up their tanks. Canada was worried about energy security. So Ottawa began pouring money into research on alternative energy, including geothermal.
If you could tell me the story about when you first started to rediscover, for want of a better word, geothermal and the documents that you went looking for in that.
So they had boxes and boxes and boxes of all the information they had collected across the country over 10 years. And all the people involved were just found out overnight that this program is no longer running anymore. But, you know, they were passionate scientists and they just didn't want this all to vanish. So all the boxes got stuffed away in corners here and there and basements and garages and offices. And it was just a big, treasure hunt.
The hunt led Grasby here to the original pumps installed to bring the underground superheated water to the surface. It's not an impressive sight, but none of this deterred Craig Dunn and his company from investing.
I fell in love very much with the geothermal energy space because of the idea of drilling holes that, so to speak, didn't run out. So tapping into a resource that is renewable was an incredible opportunity that I took on about 15 years ago.
Geothermal isn't new. Other countries have been tapping into it for years to provide electricity and heat homes. Canada, though, is a laggard, at least until now. Dunn knows that because of climate change, there's a business case for this sustainable energy source. His company is planning to invest $250 million into the Mount Meager site by 2025.
So prior to that, even more remote than it is today, is that we didn't have road access into this site. And from a resource perspective, amazing, but from a project development perspective, very challenging. As we see those change on this project, we see that the opportunity to come back to Meager made so much sense. That's a natural fracture system. Look, you can see it. It's not a clean cut.
Even more exciting for these two geologists, though, is a box of rocks. It's a bonding moment most of us will never quite grasp.
So we can see this is like a constant change between the different types of rock.
Translation? These samples from deep underground prove the rock is porous and fractured. The water, heated by magma from the volcano, can then travel through the rock to the surface.
We take the heat out of it, put the water back into the system, and over the course of time, it percolates through a hot rock, coming back to me as 260-degree water.
There's another man there, you'll notice. It's the chief of the Tuat First Nation, Dean Nelson. And this site is on his nation's traditional land never settled by a treaty.
And then the whole solar facility on the backside. We wanted to do it this way, but we had to do it flat because the snow comes up to like here. So we lose about a third of the solar panels.
It's Chief Nelson's first time here ever. He's getting a glimpse of what he's only seen on paper or in photos.
Being here finally on the ground is amazing. Like to have a say in what's happening here, to see what is proposed and what can be, I guess.
But then getting all the power supply in here and hitting it in charge. I don't even know, did you walk around the back?
No, I didn't yet.
Okay, so
he and his people play a crucial role in this, and Craig knows it.
So you own the rights, but you don't own the land, because you need their consent to go forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't see consent as a need. I think of it as an opportunity. We have an opportunity here to show, how we can work with the local First Nations to develop a green energy resource and have them actively involved in that process.
Because ultimately nothing moves forward without the First Nations' blessing, more or less a requirement to avoid messy lawsuits or confrontations on the site, unlike so much other resource extraction that's been carved out of Tuat territory for generations. We met Chief Nelson in his own community to talk more about what matters to him.
I'm curious to know what people are telling you in the community about it.
What is in it for them? Like, how is it going to affect them? Like, is it negative like everything else that has happened over the years? Or, you know, are we looking at some positive things coming from this?
Yeah, because it must be hard for people to trust.
Yes, very, very hard, because we've, like we said, we've been on the receiving end of these things, you know, watching industry progress through here without our participation or, you know, any kind of acknowledgement. So, and that's probably the biggest thing, is having that doubt about, you know, that we're being taken again, kind of thing, you know.
The conversations continue between those who claim the land and those who want to profit from it. All the while, the science speeds ahead, driven by the same thirst for discovery that fueled their predecessors. Steve, can you tell me where we are right now and why we're here?
Oh, sure. So we're standing on the flank of Mount Cayley, which is a volcano in the Garibaldi volcanic belt, it's called. And what we're looking here for is the source of heat underneath the volcano.
Why do you think there might be that geothermal heat under this mountain?
Well, you know, I guess just being a volcano, that is a good place to start. And I think, you know, it's partly just until you see it, it's hard to believe it.
Now on year 2 of data collection here at Cayley, the next generation of geologists has inherited the methodical patience that science demands. This time, though, amidst the world's growing quest for sustainable energy sources. The bigger picture tells the story of one critical piece of it, the hunt for the heat beneath our feet. Laura Lynch, CBC News, Mount Cayley, British Columbia.
A great piece by our colleague Laura Lynch, and Johanna Wagstaffe is here now live with us tonight. Jo, a whole lot of yellow on that map there.
Yes, which means a whole lot of summer heat. It does not feel like the end of summer, and it does not feel like the beginning of fall, well past the end of summer for much of the province. Here's what people in Kelowna are thinking about this exceptional heat.
We did check the weather before we came, so we were expecting some nice weather, so we brought our bathing suits and we've been swimming every day.
Yes, swimming every day. I've heard from our colleagues in CBC Kelowna, they've also been sneaking a dip in around lunchtime. Temperatures have been in the mid-20s for the Okanagan, about 5 to 7 degrees above seasonal. We've been breaking records across the province for 3 days now. Take a look at the temperatures right now. 24 in Princeton, 22 for Kelowna, and hanging on to a 20 at YVR. That high pressure is getting pushed out, but just briefly. This swirling low off the coast is going to bring in some cloud cover overnight. In fact, already starting to see those high clouds sneak in. A little bit of a temperature drop back to our seasonal of 17, but I have to warn you, not much rain. We will see that spread across the island tonight. Not a lot of millimeters though, Anita. I know we could use some, but I'll take you through a soggier Wednesday comparatively coming up.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
The Toronto Raptors are on the island as they open up their training camp. Why the province is such a draw for Canada's only NBA team. It's next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. A Toronto recording studio is celebrating a milestone this year. Kensington Sound opened its doors in 1972 and is still going strong. Talia Ritchie spoke with the owner about the studio's 50-year history.
How you get your love in your dreams.
It's unbelievable, like to think that, I mean, it's exactly the way it was. Like 72. Nothing's changed. Hi, my name's Faizi Tayeb, and I'm the owner of Kensington Sound in Toronto. Oh, I'm second from the right. I would have been 22. We weren't very good as a band. And I just fell in love with the process of recording. I went, oh my God, this is what I want to do.
What kind of things does this 50-year anniversary have you reflecting on, like, you know, in terms of your accomplishments here and some of the people that you've worked with?
It's gone through so many phases. We were the #1 punk studio in the 80s. 3 years later, we became a reggae studio. We did nothing but reggae in here. And then we went country, and then we went jazz. The two albums that symbolize the eclecticness of Kensington sound are we've done 2 platinum albums, one for Teenage Head, of course, which is a raucous punk band.
One elephant went out to play.
And the other platinum album we have is Sharon, Lois, and Bram, a children's album. The Land of Miles. I was the first one, I think, other than the writers, to hear Black Velvet. We bought some less well-known gear that stood the test of time, and this is one of them. This is called a Midas console, and it's a recording console that was built in Britain, hand-wired, so we have serial number 001. We have the prototype, and it's still working, and it still sounds wonderful.
You had no comments or complaints.
I first was introduced at 13. I came in just for I guess like a preliminary stage of the career, just to see where I was at. We did a little recording just so that I can get a feel. The first time I was here, I kind of like walked out thinking, wow, like I really felt at home.
You don't know how to channel it. You've been scared to open up because you don't know who you can trust, and I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
And ever since then, I've just been coming back every Saturday, just recording and getting ready to prepare a project.
There's something about artists, and I'm a little biased, I would say musicians. I find them very humble. I find them incredibly generous to share their talents and their experience. And it's been 50 wonderful years that I didn't expect that I would be here, but I am, and it's been an incredible ride.
Welcome back. The Toronto Raptors are in BC this week. The team is holding its training camp at the University of Victoria ahead of the 2022 NBA season. Our Raphael Guillemette is there. And Raphael, I know there's been some momentum over the years to really try to make the Raptors Canada's team. Does this have anything to do with why they are in Victoria?
Well, possibly. I would say that the first part of the answer is probably that it's just beautiful out here at this time of the year. I've only been in Victoria for about 12 hours now, and there's no way to dispute the choice of the location. Although that's obviously not most of the answer. The Raptors have a long-standing relationship with British Columbia. They've held their training camp here for 7 times now since the team's inception in 1995. And it's also their second time since 2017 at the University of Victoria. Also, the head coach of the Toronto Raptors, Nick Nurse, happens to be the head coach of the men's national team that has played on numerous occasions in Victoria and also in Vancouver. So there's this mutual love between the Victoria and Vancouver area and the Toronto Raptors. After that, there's, like you said, this goal, this quest for the Toronto Raptors to establish themselves as Canada's team. And team president Masai Ujiri alluded to that fact yesterday when we talked to him in Toronto.
I think that tour has been good for us, you know, in years past, and it's now the feeling of our team, you know, like we feel like we are Canada's team. We feel like we're a global team. So to touch all these cities, whether it's training camp in Victoria or playing in Edmonton or Montreal, we want to feel, you know, like the people of Canada, because we know of the support.
But it's quite cool to have the opportunity to see them and sort of meet them in a sense without having to travel, which is normally the case for people from Victoria.
Yeah, and I know some very excited kids in Victoria ready to watch them play this weekend. First practice happened today. How did that go?
It went well, according to head coach Nick Nurse. I have to say in all transparency that journalists, just like the public, aren't allowed in for the practice session this week. As reporters, actually, we're only allowed in for the last 15 minutes. So all we could see was smiles and just a very good comprehension of what the team wants to achieve this year. this team is poised to make another push for the playoffs like they did last season. So we'll see what they can do with this 2022-2023 season upcoming.
Got most of the team back, so you can move pretty fast this year with that stuff. But there's still a good amount of teaching going on for the guys that haven't been here, just again, so we can all get on the same page as quickly as possible. But super energetic morning, like they were raring to go, and they were really playing hard today, man. Really looked good out there.
And for these kids eager to see maybe their favorite team in the NBA now, the Raptors will play an open practice on Friday here in Victoria, so there's an occasion there to see their favorite players.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of people lining up and ready to go for that. Thanks, Raphael, in Victoria tonight. And the biggest tournament in men's soccer will start in Qatar in less than 2 months. And while Canada has qualified for the World Cup for the first time in 36 years, Thomas Dagla tells us it's been a bumpy road for a team with big ambitions.
Nothing draws fans to the pub on a Tuesday lunch hour quite like soccer, especially when the men's national team is playing, giving Canadians one of their last chances to see the squad together before November's World Cup.
This is the best team Canada's ever put on a pitch ever.
It's amazing. It's incredible to see Canada playing against these players.
While fans expected to see a noon kickoff, the first 18 minutes of the match wasn't shown in Canada, apparently due to technical issues. Just the latest bump on this country's road to the World Cup.
Whenever you're trying to grow a sport, both from a participation standpoint, but from a commercial standpoint, there's going to be growing pains and hiccups.
Although the squad has energized soccer fans in this country like no other men's team in 4 decades, behind the scenes, the players complain they've been treated unfairly.
In June, they boycotted their own game in Vancouver over a contract dispute. Canada's national teams can't agree with the country's soccer association on how to share new World Cup revenue.
Good ball across.
Then last week, this happened.
And it's Jonathan David.
Goal scorer Jonathan David mounting a protest of sorts, covering the Nike logo on his jersey. The 31 other nations heading to the world's biggest tournament are all getting new uniforms, but not Canada.
The fact that the federation, that Nike wasn't ready for this, I think it's unacceptable, to be honest with you.
On the pitch this time, the Canadians faced their stiffest competition in recent memory.
Suarez.
Falling 2-0 to Uruguay.
To Nunez. Knocks that down.
That broadcast saw more challenges, just as the team faces bigger battles ahead. Thomas Dagla, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up after the break, we talk tales of survival days after a hurricane tore through oceanside communities on Canada's east coast.
Cellular telephones are becoming a standard part of life for many people across this country. But as their popularity grows, so do questions about their use, questions of privacy and security. Johanna Wagstaffe has that story.
Business is growing for the cellular phone companies in British Columbia, but so are questions about the security of these phones. Questions prompted by the Bud Smith scandal. In July, the opposition NDP released tapes they had received of car phone conversations involving Attorney General Bud Smith. The contents of the tape led to the resignation of Smith and a hot political controversy. All of that has many cellular phone users worried about how secure their conversations are.
It really kind of worries me if the neighbors listening too.
And I think that it's made us far more aware when using the cellular phone that there is possibility of other people listening.
In fact, Smith didn't have a cellular phone, but a radio phone, a sort of advanced two-way radio which is fairly easy to listen in on with a simple scanner. By contrast, cellular phones are much more sophisticated. The companies say there are so many channels, it's difficult for someone to use a scanner to find and listen to a specific conversation. But companies warn cellular phone users should take care.
Well, the concern they should have is that if they're into a highly confidential conversation, it would be my advice, and in fact it's the advice in the Cantel Handbook, that they should use caution and discretion.
All of this has led to the question of legality. Whether it's a radio phone, a cellular, or even a cordless phone at home, is listening in on these conversations with a scanner against the law? In the criminal code, eavesdropping on phone conversations is prohibited if it's reasonable for the originator to expect it will not be intercepted. It's not spelled out if that applies to portable phone conversations. And the federal government says the issue is so unclear, it isn't sure what the answer is. The BC and Alberta governments looked at the issue in light of the Bud Smith affair and concluded that in some particular circumstances, intercepting these conversations might be illegal. That conclusion led the Deputy Attorney General of BC to issue this warning about cellular phone calls.
In the future, the interception and/or disclosure of such conversations may result in criminal prosecution.
But a senior member of the Attorney General's staff admitted the legality is not very clear.
The law in this area, as Mr. Hughes has pointed out, is at its frontier stage. And it's very difficult to predict what a court might say about two cellular phones, one person speaking to another.
Some legal experts say what's needed is a new law, one that's written with the current technology in mind. But unless that happens, or until there's a major case on the issue, it seems that the legality of intercepting portable phone conversations is still up in the air. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
Days after Fiona slammed into Atlantic Canada, residents are still dealing with the destruction left behind by the storm. And as Alison Northcott tells us, the devastation is so widespread, residents say they can't even begin to think about recovery just yet.
Days later, there's still a sense of disbelief.
And as you look behind me and so on, there's nothing but a total disaster.
The Port aux Basques fire chief says this community needs a lot of help to clean up and rebuild destroyed homes.
Where do they pick up the pieces and get moving and so on, right? It's going to be difficult for them.
I could use that.
Melissa Barr is picking up donated clothes at a local elementary school. She and her family left their home in a panic during the storm. No time to take anything with them.
It's very emotional, you know, because it's our first home we've ever owned. We've never owned anything in my whole life. I'm 44 years old, and now I don't have a home anymore.
The Canadian military is on the ground in 3 Atlantic provinces. Their task is to clear debris from roads and bridges so power can be restored. There is plenty of community action too, like this truckload of donations.
It got bigger than we expected, and it's a great thing.
It's going to go to all those people who have lost their homes and they can't go back into their homes. It's you know, they need all this.
This is a big part of our identity in PEI, the coastal communities.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau toured some of the affected areas.
We know that it's not just right now that they need help. It'll be for weeks and months and even years to come, and we will be there for each other.
Fisherman Marvin Graham sees his livelihood turned upside down. For many communities, entire industries like agriculture, tourism, and fisheries have been disrupted.
The waters just keep raising every time there's a storm. It just keeps getting higher and higher. I don't know what they're going to do. It needs a lot of work.
So many areas need work. Schools on PEI will remain closed until at least next week. In Nova Scotia, some schools will reopen on Wednesday as crews continue to restore power. But that's just one part of the cleanup, and there's so much more ahead. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
The U.S. is boosting aid to Pakistan with more than $66 million now going to the South Asian country. Recent flooding has killed about 1,600 people since June. The CBC's Margaret Evans looks at the situation in Sindh province.
We're standing on a levee right next to Lake Manchar, and it's a good place to explain at least part of what's going on in this part of Sindh province. When the flooding began, the lake came very close to flooding its banks, coming up over the top here. And when that happened, officials knew that they were in trouble, so they cut this levee, which is about 60 kilometers long, in 3 different places to try to control the water. But it didn't stop the flooding and the devastation to come, because if you look out onto the other side of it, you'll see a valley that used to be lush farmland. People grew cotton here, they grew wheat, and now it's completely submerged in water. We've been touring the area a little bit by boat, talking to some people who are still living or staying on their rooftops, if those rooftops exist, and there aren't very many. Ask them why they're still there, because they don't have clean drinking water. It's impossible, very difficult to get supplies in or out. They say they're afraid of looting, that what they have salvaged, they've managed to get up onto these high areas. They don't have a plan. They say the government isn't giving them enough help. They can get into the nearest city for about $1 or $2 if they happen to find a boat going along. So it gives you a very clear idea of just how devastating these floods have been, how difficult it is to help people in need. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Sindh Province.
Well, the British pound stabilized today after dropping to a record low yesterday. The currency's turbulence started on Friday when the Conservative government delivered the UK's biggest tax cut in 50 years. The CBC's Abby Kugadasan reports on the big gamble by the country's new Prime Minister.
British Prime Minister Liz Truss is promising her tax cuts will turn the economic ship around. But some economists had warned against cuts announced last week, saying they'll fuel inflation, which is already hovering around 10%. They also say the cuts disproportionately benefit the rich.
The people that are poor right now, that are on lower incomes, they're struggling with their heating and all their bills. Everything's gone up. Why on earth would they be cutting it for the people in a higher income bracket? It's ridiculous.
You could argue that it's a good strategy because it'll attract sort of businesses to come and set up their establishments in London. But on the other hand, again, it's going to reduce the overall, say for instance, the money that can be allocated to welfare benefits.
On Monday, the markets reacted to those tax cuts. The pound sterling plummeted to historic lows. The pound has made up some ground today, but that's linked to the expectation that the Bank of England will soon intervene and raise interest rates. Some mortgage lenders pulled offers from the market, anticipating that rates will go up. A weak pound also means people will have to pay more for groceries because the United Kingdom imports more than 50% of its food. Millions are already struggling to pay high electricity bills amid the energy crisis in Europe. Labour leader Keir Starmer says the Conservatives have lost control of the economy.
They haven't just failed to fix the roof. They've ripped out the foundations, smashed through the windows, and now they've blown the doors off for good measure.
Starmer also unveiled he would start a publicly owned renewable energy company within a year of becoming Prime Minister. A new poll shows Labour has its largest lead over the Tories in 2 decades. The next general election is set for 2024. Abby Kugadasan, CBC News, London.
Another hurricane with more communities preparing for the worst. A look at Hurricane Ian set to barrel on shore in Florida. And at 6:42, a live look down Cannabis Street in Vancouver. The warm days are set to continue, but there's a little bit of a blip. Johanna has the details coming up. Hurricane Ian is churning through the Gulf of Mexico and is headed to Florida. Forecasters expect it to intensify into a Category 4 storm before it makes landfall there tomorrow. And as Katie Simpson reports, officials have issued evacuation orders for more than 2 million people, including those in parts of St. Petersburg and Tampa.
Across western Cuba's farming communities, Hurricane Ian cut a swath of destruction. Wind gusts topping 200 kilometers an hour ripped branches from trees and tore apart buildings. The power is out for tens of thousands, with no firm estimate on when it will be restored. Ian is now taking aim at Florida, and while its exact path is unclear, it is certain to bring misery.
In some areas, there will be catastrophic flooding and life-threatening storm surge.
More than 2 million people, mostly along the Gulf Coast, are under evacuation orders.
Do not wait. Time is of the essence. Act now.
Properties in low-lying areas are being boarded up, and there's a rush to fill as many sandbags as possible. The worst of Ian is expected to hit as early as Wednesday night, somewhere between Fort Myers and Tampa Bay.
Our biggest concern as we wait for this storm to make landfall is storm surge. And I will note that storm surge is a leading cause of hurricane-related fatalities.
The rain is already falling in the southern part of the state, the start of what is expected to be a long, brutal haul.
We're going to see Ian slow to a crawl once it makes landfall in Florida, moving only 4 or 5 miles per hour. We could see some areas get 20 to 25 inches of rainfall. So water is going to be a huge story with this storm.
President Joe Biden has spoken with some of the mayors of the major cities in Hurricane Ian's path, promising to provide them with whatever they may need in this moment and whatever they'll need in the days and weeks to come. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Let's bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe now. Joe, I know you are watching this hurricane close as well. What's the latest?
It's a major hurricane and strengthening quickly, Anita. In fact, the latest track has it re-strengthening to a Category 4 storm on the 1 to 4 Saffir-Simpson scale, making landfall at this point south of Tampa before moving across the peninsula and potentially back in to the open waters before a second landfall as a tropical storm. So a long track still to go, but a lot of concern around the Tampa Bay area, as you heard from Katie, a city that has already seen flooding and that doesn't often see these kinds of strength hurricanes make landfall in that area. And just look at that swirl as that storm races towards the coast. We'll be watching that closely. A different kind of swirling storm off our coast just before that cold front moves through tomorrow. We always get the strongest southerly flow before a cold front. So if you've noticed the poor air quality, the haze in the distance, that is forest fire smoke, mainly from fires just south of the border, but that is being ushered up today. And again, more noticeable today than the past couple of days because of that southerly push. Now, winds will change direction tomorrow as that front moves through. Clouds already moving in. Not a ton of rain. I know we could use it. We are under exceptional level 3 drought conditions for the island and most of all of the lower mainland, most of the south coast, in fact. Watch as I take you through tomorrow. Here's 2-3 p.m., our best chance of seeing any showers. Not a lot, though, as we head after through the evening hours and into Thursday morning. A few more clouds lingering, slight chance of a sprinkle Thursday morning, but that's pretty much all she wrote as far as the rain goes because high pressure moves back in. There we go. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, looking to get into these 5 to 10 degree above seasonal temperatures once again. Taking you through next week, I maybe see some indications of a more zonal flow, meaning west to east, bringing in some more Pacific systems. But that's 10 days from now. So just getting through a little blip tomorrow and then back to the summer weather. Showers in through Victoria. Hopefully you'll get some too, being very dry. Definitely seeing the rain in through Prince Rupert and Port Hardy, but it really dries out before it gets to us. Seasonals for this time of the year based on our past 3 decades average anyway, 16. So look at these afternoon highs, even with our cold front blip still above seasonal. Anita, no parkas yet, except for maybe you.
I've already got it out.
Yeah, all right, okay.
All right, thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Closures of cannabis stores are becoming more and more noticeable across Canada. As the CBC's Austin Grabish explains, it's prompting some people to ask if the market has reached a saturation point.
Spinning ahead with the acquisition of 3 new stores. Delta 9 now has 38 locations across Canada. The company planning to acquire more stores from smaller players in the next 6 months.
We personally feel Canadian cannabis and the retail segment is now reaching a point of saturation.
In Manitoba, there are more licensed cannabis stores than Tim Hortons. In a highly competitive market, CEO John Arbuthnot says red tape, high tax, and low margins make it hard to be profitable and enticing for smaller stores to sell out to bigger companies. The doors are closed at this cannabis store here in Winnipeg. It's just one of several retailers to shut down in this city in recent months and part of a larger trend across Canada. From Winnipeg to Toronto, it doesn't take long to find a former store for lease or a notice of default. The trend has companies reevaluating where they open stores. Fire and Flower has shut down 11 locations across Canada. And with the potential of federal legalization in the U.S., the company is eyeing an expansion south.
There's more to come in this ride, and what we've shown is our ability to adapt.
Cannabis analyst David Brown says a lot of people thought legalization would be a windfall, but didn't realize how fierce the market would be. Still, he sees great success amid the doom and gloom facing some.
We are seeing a few closing, but the number opening is still much higher than those closing.
Back in Winnipeg, Delta 9 CEO says the industry is still young. He sees potential for growth.
We are also obviously active in terms of consolidation, so more mergers and acquisitions.
But in a market this fierce, small independent stores may find it tough to survive. Austin Grabish, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It's an accusation that has the chess world reeling. Why a world champion is accusing a star player of cheating. That's next.
That's the connection there to the Tuat family.
Magnus Tuat worked for the Hudson's Bay Company for 30 years until his death in Saskatchewan in 1801. He helped build the Lower Hudson House. His son, William, was a signatory of Treaty 6.
And then I'm down here. This is my mother, Teresa. And there's my name there, David Paul.
David Bodwerson recently discovered he's related to Magnus. He says no one in his family was consulted.
I'm more perplexed than anything. I thought when they would have done this, they would have perhaps consulted the family or at least the Métis people around that area.
Crotwell Métis local coordinator David Rondeau says the area is the birthplace of Métis people, but they weren't consulted either. He says he shared those concerns with those who nominated the site and the Heritage Branch more than a year ago.
And I thought in lieu of me bringing this to their attention, that they would proceed in a manner that's in conjunction with truth and reconciliation. What has gone on now is anything but.
Rondeau has worked on the site for years. On it, he says there are about 30 graves linked to the smallpox epidemic of 1780s. He and others are angry that a nearby newspaper released a map detailing its whereabouts.
Smallpox graves, is it appropriate?
A University of Saskatchewan archaeology professor says that can attract treasure seekers.
And that's all anyone with, even a faint interest in history needs to go out and think, oh, this is a great idea. I can take some of this and put it on my mantle, or maybe, sell it on eBay or whatever. And so
Clark says people can be prosecuted under the Heritage Act, but so far no one has been in Saskatchewan. The president of the Association of Métis, Non and Stidus Indians of Saskatchewan agrees and is angry. Charlene Lavallee worries that the site will face the same fate as Batoche, which fell victim to foraging intruders.
We keep saying nothing about us without us, and this is a prime example of, traditionally how it's been, and I thought we had arrived at a better place with the government.
Lavallee and the chief of nearby Sturgeon Lake First Nation say it's a violation of treaty rights and of Section 11 of UN DRIP, which gives them the right to maintain and protect their archaeological and historic sites. The Ministry of Parks, Culture and Sport says no formal community consultation is required to designate a heritage property. But they say they did issue notices in local newspapers with opportunities for people to formally object. No one objected, so they went ahead with the designation. Pratish Dayal, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Celebrate the achievements and resilience of women in the workforce with CBC's Michelle Elliott on November 2nd at the annual Dress for Success Luncheon. Get tickets and learn more at successluncheon.ca. And support youth arts education with Gloria Makarenko at Splash, Arts Umbrella's 40th annual gala and art auction on October 22nd. Get your tickets at artsumbrella.com.
The world of chess is in turmoil tonight after its top player openly accused an opponent of cheating. Leanne Young has the story behind the allegations and how the chess community is reacting.
An opponent left hanging and chess fans in shock.
I'm sitting here in a bit of a kind of a stunned silence. I don't really know how to react to this.
Five-time world champion Magnus Carlsen's stunning move, failing to show up for a match and withdrawing from a $480,000 tournament.
And there we have it. Handshake.
It came after he lost a game to American teenager Hans Niemann. His explanation was cryptic, tweeting this meme.
I prefer really not to speak. If I speak, I am in big trouble.
And what? Then more drama 2 weeks later, playing Niemann again, this time online. Carlsen forfeited after just one single move. But on Tuesday, the Norwegian's actions became clearer. I believe that Niemann has cheated more and more recently than he has publicly admitted. Carlsen gave no evidence, saying only that Niemann had made unusual progress as a player and that he appeared not to be fully concentrating on the game. Niemann has admitted to cheating in the past.
I'm admitting this, and I'm saying my truth because I do not want any misrepresentation. I am proud of myself that I learned from that mistake and now have given everything to chess.
Carlsen says there's more he wants to say about the allegations and says he hopes the truth comes out. But Vancouver chess master Veronica Guo says the chess community is torn.
I think it's going to be really difficult to prove that he cheats unless Carlsen reveals the information that he said he has.
Cheating in chess is rare but can happen, covertly using computers to generate optimal moves far more quickly than the human brain.
And today, the programs are far, far stronger than even the world champion.
Our first shots of the day of people arriving for.
Tournament officials do take precautions. Niemann has even offered to play naked. But Carlsen says he's not willing to play against Niemann ever again. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Yeah, the world of competitive chess has always been big, but of course gained a lot of popularity after that Netflix show, The Queen's Gambit, a show definitely recommend if you haven't watched it. This is CBC Vancouver News for tonight. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.